know you. We all know you, Donna.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right, then what I need to do is let me get my pictures up so we can look at those. So hang on one second here. Okay.
Oh, that's pretty.
Sierre Lione is what we'll be talking about. It all
I was
began.
trying to get Mally on the Wi-Fi, on there, but she can't find the Wi-Fi. I need to cut mine off.
I need to be.
Cut my audio off.
Okay, should I go ahead and start?
Yes, and John DeWeese should mute his microphone.
Let me mute, I'm sorry.
Okay. It all began with Mohammed and Safi Brahma following God's call to return to their native village in Sierra Leone to share the gospel there. Most people had never heard about Jesus because they had grown up in a Muslim family, actually, just like Mohammed and Safi did. As young adults, Mohammed and Safi got an opportunity to travel to the US, and they ended up living in Charlotte for 35 years. 35 years. They had heard about the Christian faith, so when a friend invited them to Little Church on the Lane, and of course that's our Moravian church there in Charlotte, they went. They learned about Jesus, they joined the church, and they became very active Moravian Christians. Then in 2007, with permission from the PEC, Mohammed and Safi went back to Sierra Leone, a country that's half the size of North Carolina. Their goal was to plant a church and see what God would do with that. The mission has grown into 5 congregations in the scattered villages, each with its own pastor, plus a large secondary school that's the only one in the village where they settled. Sadly, Mohammed got sick and died 3 years ago. So now the picture changes to Safi as primary leader of the mission. I've visited this West African country 8 times between my first trip in 2010 and the most recent one in October 2019. No trips during COVID, of course. By now, I have many friends there, and we stay connected with our cell phones. Lots of texting. Let's talk about the village of Leone, where everything started. These are typical homes, 2 to 3 rooms, no indoor water, no electricity. It's a very poor village in a very poor country. I love walking around the village when I'm there, waving and speaking to people. I'm known as the white lady at the Moravian church, but some villagers have learned my name. Since there's no electricity, all the cooking is done outside over a big fire. They eat twice daily, mid-morning, late afternoon. And it's nearly always rice because that grows there and it's available. Children are everywhere. Now I have to tell you a story about the little boy on the left end of the bench. You see, I have for years asked my own children, when the grandchildren outgrow their summer clothes, t-shirts, shorts, etc., would you please give them to me and I'll take them to Sierra Leone and Safi can give them out to whoever she wants. So one day these children are all in the churchyard playing around, and I looked at that little boy on the left end and I thought, I think I recognize that shirt. So I went over to him to talk to him, and I laid my hand on his shoulder. And then I just slid it back to the tag in the back of the shirt and looked at it. And sure enough, it said Luke, which is my grandson's name. And I knew he was wearing one of Luke's shirts. And that was just really fun. I have a close relationship with 5 or 6 of the older boys in the church who were middle school age when we first met. When I'm there, we talk about lots of things, including their hopes for the future. And I've often taken Bible trivia games with me that we play together in the evenings. Now let's talk about the Moravian School in Leone. When Muhammad and Safi first arrived, there was only one school in the village, and that was an elementary school. So they began to build a secondary school, one wing for the middle school and the other for the high school. Now students can continue their education where they live instead of having to walk to another village to go to class. Here's a typical classroom with desks and benches that are made there in the village. You see 2 to 3 people sit on each bench and share a desk. The teacher writes notes on the blackboard for students to copy. No schools in America have any blackboards anymore. Before COVID, I was constantly collecting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of composition books and pens, so I could ship them over in the barrels and they could be given to the students. Now, the rule in Sierra Leone is that once you get to middle school, all classes are taught in English, and the students must speak English during the school day. They do get instruction in English while in the primary school, but they don't speak it much at that age. So one day I was visiting at the school, and the students had a short break between classes, and I was talking with some of them. One of the boys broke the rule. He ignored English and spoke a word in Mende, that's their language. He said to me, "Belay." I didn't understand. I just stood there and I finally said, I don't know what to say. He looked shocked and he said, "Belay?" Again, I said, I don't know what to tell you. Not realizing this word meant, "What's your name?" What's your name? And I kept telling him, "I don't know." And he said finally, "Wow, you don't even know your name." The school has a very good reputation, and the enrollment has grown and grown. There's now over 600 students. They have recently added an additional building with more classrooms and 2 small offices for the principals, a principal for middle school, principal for high school. Most of the students are Muslim, like most people who live there. But the Moravian School is Christian. They begin each day with an opening assembly in the yard where they hear scripture, they say the Lord's Prayer together, and the Muslim parents don't mind at all because they are so grateful for this educational opportunity for their children. An excellent relationship exists between the 2 faiths in Leone because of all the ways Muhammad and Safi have helped the people. Even the imams from the mosque, and I've also made friends with them, have expressed their gratitude that Muhammad and Safi came back to the village. This is an amazing sight for that village, our school, with lights. Money was raised by Moravians here, so solar power could be installed there. A few years before Muhammad died, he and Safi built a house close to the school, and they were able to take advantage of the solar power, making their house the only one in the village with electricity. So the early years that I visited there, and I slept in the mission house, and I went to bed every night just covered in sweat because it was 95 degrees or more. This country is on the equator almost, and it hardly ever changes temperatures. I would just lay there all night, just sweating, sweating, sweating. But now that Muhammad and Safi built a house that has electricity through the solar power, can you imagine the treat to go to bed at night? Yes, covered in sweat, but you can plug in a fan and turn it on, for goodness sakes. All right, so now we'll talk about the churches. This is Pastor Faba, who led the first congregation in Leone from its beginning until recently. Since this picture was made in 2019, when I was last there, he got sick and he had to leave the village, and he's never been able to come back. So another church member now does a really good job of leading worship, and Safi's responsible for communion and baptisms. Here is the first church building. And yes, one of the letters is about to fall off, but that's perfectly normal for there. It's really actually nice inside of this building. It has an additional room beside the worship room, and they use that for children's Sunday school. Muhammad had this built soon after they arrived in 2007. And 4 other congregations have been added to the mission since then, because people in different villages wanted a Christian church. Safi calls the Sunday worship, she calls it divine worship. Every other day of the week, all 5 churches have morning prayers at 6 a.m., and that includes reading our daily text. I think they do this because they live in a Muslim country where morning prayers is the norm. The first time I attended Sunday worship in Sierre Lione, I was doing my best to follow along because, and they were translating for me. And then it came time for the offering. And I had purposely taken some Leones to give that morning. So I was sitting on the front row, and these 2 teenagers, a girl and a boy, came up to the front to the pastor, time for the offering. And the pastor gave each one of them just a bag, just a cloth bag. And I thought, oh, I am very excited to see that they're letting youth participate in the service. So these 2 youth just started ambling around the little sanctuary there, not in any particular pattern. And people would put money in their bags. And I'm sitting there on the front row with my money, wanting to put it in one of the bags. Nobody ever came my direction. And I noticed they were starting to get farther back. And so I just got up and very quietly walked down the aisle till I found the boy and dropped my money in his bag. And he looked at me a little puzzled. But then I went back and sat down, and then they came forward to the pastor at the end and gave the offering bags. The pastor said a prayer, and then the pastor said, we'll report on last Sunday's offering. The men gave this amount, and the women gave this amount. And I realized, oh my gosh, the boy was taking up money from the men, and I dropped my money in there and messed it all up. But that's just one of many mistakes I've made while I've been there. Now they have advanced to using offering envelopes and a large basket. Doesn't matter who you are, you can put it in the basket with your envelope. Here are the teachers in the children's Sunday school class. Augustine and Monjama are their names. When I'm there, they like for me to help teach. So one time I took a dozen large pictures of Old and New Testament stories, big posters they were. And I held them up one by one and asked the kids, what was that picture about? What story did that picture reveal? And you know what? They knew all the answers. I was really impressed. Here are the children in the class. It's one class, so all the ages are mixed together in that one class. Usually 25 to 30 kids are there, even more in worship that follows Sunday school. I think maybe they are not quite sure what to do when I say I want to take their picture, because usually there's a lot more smiles going on than this. All right, let's talk about all the congregations that have sprung up because people in nearby villages heard about the Moravian church in Leone. They visited it and they wanted one of those in their village. Here's a picture of all 5 of the pastors. So Anthony Faba is on the back row left. He's the pastor in Leone at the very first church. We've already mentioned him. The second congregation that came about is in Morfendor. That pastor is on the front row, right in the middle, yellow shirt. His name is Francis Calou. Now that church, when you visit that church, it has one room that they use for worship. It has a dirt floor. They haven't ever done anything about that, but they did make some wooden benches for people to sit on. The third congregation is in Mbauma, and that pastor is the back row to the right. His name is Brima Arona. To get to that church, you have to walk up a very steep hill, just a dirt path up the hill. And you go in and there's the one little room for worship. They too have a dirt floor, but they didn't ever make any benches to sit on. If you want to sit down, there's some long planks that are propped on some cinder blocks sitting there on the dirt floor, so you can sit on that. The fourth congregation is in Calon. Now that is a larger town instead of a village. And the pastor is on the front row to the right. Francis Brima is his name. The people that were bringing about this congregation and wanted to begin this church had an unusually high vision for who they wanted to be in their church. So they went ahead and started building a structure on their own to have 2 really large rooms and several small rooms, all in their church. But they started that 5 years ago and they still are not finished. They kind of overestimated what building a church would be like. But one day it'll be a beautiful, finished, completed thing. In the meantime, they worship in a temporary spot. The fifth congregation is in Yondohun, and that pastor is the front row left. His name is Samba Lamin. And that group just started worshiping, maybe 3-4 years ago in a little shack with a straw roof. And when it rained, they were in trouble. But they have now replaced that with a very small building. At least it's a building with a tin roof on the top. Now, I was able to get this picture of all 5 pastors because they were attending something called a quarterly meeting, which happens every 3 months. For the last several years, all 5 congregations send their pastor and other representatives from the church on a Saturday to this quarterly meeting at one of the churches. They alternate locations. They begin about 11 o'clock, meeting all together, and after lunch, they divide into small groups, such as the women's ministry, the men's ministry, the youth, the pastors get together, the church treasurers. The point is to catch up on information, to share ideas and encourage one another. And I think it's a great plan. I attended a quarterly meeting when I was there in 2019 and very much enjoyed being with lots of the church leaders. Of course, they put me on the agenda to speak to everyone, which gave me a chance to share that many Moravians in the US know about them, care about them, and want their mission to grow. And then just off the top of my head, I ended by saying, I love visiting all of you. And I have done this 8 times now. So I'm wondering, when are you going to visit me? And they all kind of laughed at that. I want to talk about 2 special people now, and this is the first one. This is my favorite little boy. in Sierre Lione. His name is Basu, and he lives at Safi's house. So this picture was taken inside her house. Now, because he's not yet in middle school, he does not speak English, but he understands some of it from his elementary school. He spends a lot of time with me when I visit. He is just a sweet, sweet little boy. On several trips, I took a puzzle that he's holding in the picture. And I am going to show you right here. This puzzle is in the shape of a heart. And there are all these pieces in it that come out, of course, when you dump it over. So the pieces are created for each one of them to look like a letter in the alphabet. You take them all out and you figure out how to put them. This is basically for children. Figure out how to put them in order to pieces to spell I-L-O-V-E-Y-O-U. And then after you get that spelled out, then the hard part comes of trying to figure out how to get the pieces back in the holder correctly. So the children enjoyed playing it with it, and I'd help them as needed, because if they were new at doing it, it was really hard. But Basu really loved doing the puzzle. And when he wanted to work it, he would come to me and say, I love, and I would understand what that meant, and I would go get the puzzle for him. He worked it. I took it on 2 trips, and he worked it so many times, and he got so good at it that he started covering his eyes. He would cover his eyes with one hand and put everything in place with the other one. I was completely impressed with that. It was so special to spend time with this little boy. Sadly, a few months after I left in 2019, Basu got sick and he died. Safi asked me to text her any pictures of him that I had, and there were a lot. We'll end with this young man, the other special person I want to share with you. His name is Augustine Noah. I met him in 2016. He lived in Leone, but he was not part of the church. He had not experienced that at all. Very poor, no family, no money for school fees. He was in his 20s and still trying to finish high school. So he asked me to help pay for his school fees so he wouldn't have to drop out again. And after several days of seeking God's guidance on that, I agreed. I invited Augustine to join me at worship, and he did while I was there. I then encouraged him to return often to hear about the love of Jesus. And he did. I sent him a Bible in one of the barrels that I shipped over so he could learn more. And by my visit a year later, he was very active in the church and wanted to be baptized, but purposely waited until I could be there. It was a very special moment for me. I decided to buy Augustine a cell phone so we could stay in touch. And nowadays, many people there do have cell phones. I wired his school fees each year for his high school until he finished his final year at our Moravian School. And then I discovered he really wanted to go to college so he could be a teacher. This meant I once again needed to pray about being his support. And I said, yes. This wonderful young man found a distance learning college program with a very low tuition, not far from Leone. And he could attend classes just 10 weeks a year. You would go there in December, you would go there in April, you would go there in the summer. You would attend classes those 10 weeks for a total of 3 years. So we are now in his second year of those studies. And he tells me all about them. I could never have imagined when I made my first trip to Sierra Leone in 2010 that I would have been blessed in so many ways by traveling there, by sharing life with the people, by loving them and learning from them and trying to help them as opportunities arose. May I remind us of what Muhammad used to say, God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. Muhammad would never have claimed this work in Sierra Leone was his mission. He always gave God the glory. And Safi does likewise. And so I'll close with another reminder of the Great Commission from Jesus to go into all the world and make disciples with his added assurance, I am with you always to the end of the age. Amen.
Questions?
There we go. And now I'm happy for you to ask any questions you might have. Yes, Lynn?
Yes. What kind of, if any, training do the 5 pastors have in Christianity?
Where are we?
They are all, there are a few Methodist churches in Sierra Leone. There's actually one in Leone and a few Methodist churches around about. There are some Anglican churches around and about. And so all of them have had exposure to Christianity. As far as theological training goes, there is a distance learning program that you can go to at a college that's kind of farther away and take a class in Christian theology. We would love for them to do that, but just the money for it is difficult. And so, you know, we just keep trying to help them in other ways. So they're definitely not trained in the way that our pastors are here. Yeah. Mally, I'm glad to see that you got here with us. We went ahead and started just because of the time element. So I'm glad you were here.
Well, I'm glad you did because I didn't know if I would be able to get on. I'm with Deb in the stall now.
Yes, good, great.
We thank you so much. And I know how dear Sierra Leone is to you. And I was very sad that I didn't see Safi when she was last here, you know. So thank you for the update with the school and so forth. It's amazing what they have been able to accomplish. Yeah. And when you give someone a Bible who hasn't grown up like we have, that's a very, very big challenge for them. So I thank you. Are there questions?
Donna, I know with, this is Beth, with the pandemic, travel is difficult, but can you anticipate when you would be able to return to Sierra Leone or Safi would be able to come here?
Well, Safi tries to come every summer and spend 2 or 3 months, which I think a little church on the lane that continues to support. They're the main support there. And I do too. We say, Safi, you need to kind of get away and rest some. So when she came this past summer, she also had to have some doctor appointments because she was having a lot of problems with her eyes and getting a lot of blurry stuff and seeing and everything. And so she stayed a little longer than usual to get all these doctor's appointments done. And so that was during the pandemic. So she was able to come, and she anticipates that, she'll be back again next summer for 2-3 months, something like that. I don't know when I will go. I'm not guessing this year. I don't know when I will get to go back. They are asking me that question, but I don't know.
What is the situation in Sierra Leone with the pandemic?
When everything first started, they looked like everybody else. They closed the schools, they closed the churches, people were wearing masks, not traveling around. Of course, if you live in the village of Leone and you want to go somewhere else, mostly you're going to walk there. I mean, there's no such things as cars where they live. They are in the bigger towns, but not where they live. So not much traveling around anyway. Now, everything, they just live on as normal. Schools, churches, they don't wear masks anymore. I hear no comments at all from anybody about COVID. So it's really not an issue in their village now. Now, I don't know about the capital city, Freetown, with over 1 million people all crammed in it. But anyway, they're okay in the village.
It would be nice to catch up with her when she's here. If we could have a Zoom meeting or get, who knows what'll be happening by then, but it would be nice to just say hi.
Yeah, and one of the summers she was here, we had her to come and speak during Sunday school. It just happened that she was here when we were doing the mission, Sunday school things. So, yeah.
Is her son still in Charlotte?
Her son lives in Florida. He lives in Florida. He is a chiropractor, and he has lived for all of his adult life in Florida as a doctor. Yeah.
Right.
And she has grandchildren there. Yeah. Oh, so that's another thing. When she comes to visit, she stays in Charlotte because her sister lives there. And so she just lives with her sister, but she always wants to go to Florida, to see them. And so every time I line her up to speak at a church somewhere while she's here, she comes to my house in Lexington, gets in my car, and then I take her to whatever church we're going to do whatever it is. So, but she does live in Charlotte when she's here with her sister. Yeah.
Donna,
Paul?
yeah. A few years ago, I'm not sure how I discovered it, but maybe it was through your connection. In any case, I appreciate your presentation. It's the most in-depth that I've had from Sierra Leone, and I have been contributing through Little Church on the Lane for several years now.
Thank you.
And it's nice to see these efforts and see how they are playing out over there in Sierra Leone. What do contributions from Little Church on the Lane do? What do they rely on Little Church on the Lane to do for?
Well, when I said they had recently added a building to the school, of course, they got plenty of people in the village that know how to build it with the cinder blocks and making the cement and so forth. But who's going to buy all that stuff? So that when you send contributions to Little Church on the Lane, they have a special account that you write the checks to Sierra Lione Ministry, and then all that goes to the ministry there. And a lot of it went to building that building to add to the school because of a tremendous increase in students. And they had to, Safi said, the first buildings that they built when they got there, which was the church building, and they had a little mission house. That's where she and Muhammad lived for all those years at the beginning. All of that had been there since 2007. And in that weather and everything, everything needed updating. And so they did a lot of did a lot of that for it. And then just the teachers at the school. The government has recently decided that the teachers should be paid by the government. Well, that's wonderful, except the government is always broke. And so sending money to the schools is always shorthanded. And the teachers they might get $20 a month for teaching. Some of them get a little more than that because they have higher certificates, and so forth. And so the money often helps pay the teachers at the school. There's just multiple things.
I had another little aside. You and I have a mutual friend, Fidelis Iboti.
Yes.
His story is that he also grew up as a Muslim. And when he was a young man, a teenager, he attended a Methodist church there in Nigeria and became a Christian.
Mhm.
And he had an entire career as a sports not a manager, more like an agent, I guess, mostly in soccer. But when he got to the point where he could retire, he decided he was going to become a missionary. He had in that time had become a pastor, an ordained minister. And one of the things that happened, how I met him, he came here to Winston-Salem because he had been to that Methodist church as a teenager, and the Methodist had acknowledged that the connection between Methodists and Moravians, and he had always been interested in knowing what Moravians were. So he got an opportunity to come to a Moravian church, and he came to Winston-Salem. That's how he and I got acquainted with each other, and it's been an interesting, fascinating experience.
Right, right.
So that Methodist outreach has been going on for a long time. He's in his 70s now, and he was a teenager when that happened.
Yes, I'm so glad the Methodists are very active in those areas of Africa. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions? Any other questions?
By the way, he says that that COVID is not strong in Nigeria either.
Good, good. All right, Miss Lynn.
I'm wondering, you are so generous with your gifts, and you pray in advance to see if it's the right thing to do with your gifts to the boys, the two boys, or the man and the boy, for their schooling. The school fee.
It's one person. Augustine is the one person.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought twice. That's
Yeah.
right. You prayed again for him to go to college. That was, yes. Is there any help with school fees? Because some of the people there, with children, wouldn't be able to afford going to the schools? Or do they just have to come up with it somehow? Is it expensive?
Well, for a long time, they just had to come up with it, or the school just let them keep on going, and they didn't have it. They just didn't have it. Now, what the government is saying is we should be paying, and those fees would help pay the teachers. See, now the government is saying we'll pay the teachers so the kids don't have to pay any, elementary fees or high school fees, but the money's not really there. So the kids don't have to worry about it anymore. Now, yes,
Okay, well, that's good.
But yeah.
And the Unity Women's Desk is also supporting a number of girls that Safi recommends.
Oh, exactly. Yes, because they got to have uniforms. That every time they take test things to be able to advance the next thing, they got to pay for those tests. And there's a lot of not just entrance fees, but a lot of other fees that they have to pay. That if you don't have those, you don't do it. Yeah.
So would there be any help for that from Moravians here?
Julie and the women's desk have been a huge help for girls at the Moravian School. They have for some years, and I work with Safi to get all the paperwork done for that and everything. She gives us the names and picks the people who need them, and then I do all the paperwork, get to Julie and everything. So they have helped tremendously with that.
Donna, at one time, we made a contribution for a young man to go to seminary. Is that program still in existence? I think it was $100 for someone to go to seminary in Sierra Leone.
Oh, yes, that was an adult. He was an adult. Do you know what happened? He died.
Mm.
I mean, he took the classes and everything, but then just about a year or so ago, he died. And
Right.
Is there some particular disease that these poor folks are dying of?
the problem is the medical situation there is so backward. And when somebody gets sick, they don't know what it is or what to treat it with. Or when Muhammad got sick, immediately Little Church on the Lane said, we get him to the United States. And they put him on a special plane and got him over here because he had been in the hospital there, but they would just say, we don't know what it is. We don't know what to do. Everything is just.
And the little boy?
Yeah.
You don't know.
Something internal for him. Safi just tried to explain it, but
That must break your heart.
She said he had actually had trouble with that for several times, but it had gone away.
Yes.
And, so yeah.
Mm.
Are there other questions for Donna? This has been wonderful to catch up. We have certainly had wonderful presentations, and I remind you of next Sunday when Brother Chris Giesler will be here for worship and for Sunday school. And Sunday school will be live streamed from the sanctuary. I said this last time, but technology has made us be able to keep in touch and see the needs of our brothers and sisters. And so thank you so much. I also remind you that next week, Beth Baldwin will be making an announcement about our 250th anniversary t-shirts. So that's exciting too. And money from that will support projects in World Mission. Margaret, that's all I have, unless someone else has something. Lynn, it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Likewise, Mally.
So the reminder is that since Chris Giesler physically will be here at the church, it'll be in the sanctuary, and then you'll be able to join if you're at home through the live stream, through church live stream.
That's where I was. I was puzzled as to why you weren't in the church and the sanctuary, Donna. But anyway, I found you. Thank
We're
heaven.
glad you found us.
It did.
Good. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for coming to hear about this special place.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.